Johnston's army and the Camp Floyd occupation put real money in the pockets of the saints, selling supplies, and that big surplus auction when the army departed. Also, there's the reports that Brigham Young cleared a good sum on construction materials. It was an ironic twist where the very force sent to restrain Zion ended up enriching it in the short term. But what were the real costs? The ones that didn't show up right away in the ledger. Because even though the army brought money, it forced Brigham Young to give up territory. Visions of a kingdom he'd been building since the saints rolled into the Salt Lake Valley in 1847. Brigham had to trade vast holdings, political power, and a whole lot of momentum for survival. And those were things he did not want to lose and never really got back. Welcome back to Zion's Fire, an American saga of pioneer hopes tangled in polygamous knots, theocratic defiance, and the hidden costs of survival. Join me as we follow the real costs of the army occupation to Brigham's empire dreams. Lost territory, the recall of the colonies. First and biggest hit, Brigham lost huge chunks of territory. Since arriving in the Salt Lake Valley in 1847, Brigham had aggressively colonized a Mormon corridor or empire across the Great Basin, stretching from the Salt Lake Valley westward to California and into what became Nevada. These weren't random outposts. They were deliberate claims on land, resources, and trade routes to create a self-sufficient Zion beyond U.S. interference. Brigham had personally instructed people to establish these colonies. The biggest loss was San Bernardino, California, around 3,000 saints with farms, ranches, a sawmill, and strategic Pacific access. Most got the call to return home in late 1857. 2/3 or more sold out cheap or just walked away from years of hard work. The colony basically collapsed. Same story in Carson Valley, western Nevada. Key way stations and farmland, plus other outposts like parts of the Las Vegas Mission. These weren't side projects. They were deliberate claims to make Deseret strong and safe. Brigham had to burn the edges of his own empire to save the center. It shrank Zion's practical footprint right when expansion was the goal. And long term, Congress carved off roughly 60% of the original massive Utah territory in the following years, pieces becoming Nevada, Colorado, and Wyoming, and more. Historians connect that shrinkage directly to lingering federal frustration over the Mormon problem the Utah War exposed. Then came the loss of Brigham's governorship. Since 1850, Brigham had been territorial governor, the official federal authority over civil affairs, Indian relations, and the militia. His governorship blended church and state in a way that felt like the theocratic kingdom the saints had been building toward. As part of the 1858 truce worked out with the peace commissioners, Brigham stepped down peacefully in April. Non-Mormon Alfred Cumming took over. Young got a pardon for his treason charges, but the office was gone for good. After that, Utah had outside governors, judges, and officials who actively challenged polygamy and church power. These outsiders were often skeptical or hostile and pushed back on church influence. Brigham stayed the real power as church president, but the symbolic and legal legitimacy of Governor Young disappeared. It marked a clear shift away from the independence he'd fought to protect. the move south, and human toll. But the costs went deeper than land and titles. To avoid direct confrontation, Brigham had ordered the move south in early 1858. Roughly 30,000 saints from northern Utah, including Salt Lake City, packed up and relocated 50 miles or more south to Provo and beyond. Homes, fields, and even the temple foundation were prepared for burning if the army came in hostile. Crops went untended, livestock cold or driven, mills and farms disrupted, at large personal expense. One account mentions a man spending $1,000 just to move his mill. That was serious money. Ward organizations broke down. Temple work slowed. People returned later, but they'd lost a full year of progress, and poverty lingered. Pioneer journals tell of real hardship. Families in makeshift homes, women making moccasins from scraps, and distress over leaving homes. Many moved with deep faith and loyalty, seeing it as another test like Nauvoo or Missouri, but not all went willingly or quickly. Some procrastinated or grumbled amid the move. Brigham warned of deserving punishment, severe consequences for those who didn't comply. There are a few accounts of Nauvoo Legion members intercepting small groups trying to slip north toward the army at Camp Scott, whether out of fear, doubt, or hope for protection. Records show a few cases of the Nauvoo Legion stopping people trying to slip north towards the army. There's no record of names or even big groups, just scattered folk amid the stress. But once Governor Cumming offered safe passage in late April, between 160 and 190 people, men, women, and children, took it and headed towards the army in Wyoming. Peace commissioners later claimed at least 1/3 of those who moved south felt compelled to do so through direct orders, social and ecclesiastical pressure, fear of punishment, and Nauvoo Legion presence. Leaders demanded unity to hold the community together. It preserved the core, but it weighed heavy on individuals and families. Real financial strain on church resources, the defense preparations, fortifications, militia mobilization, and scorched earth tactics all drained cash. The church lost its federal mail contract for the Brigham Young Express and Carrying Company, which was a big investment. To cover war expenses, they printed $100,000 in Deseret currency notes signed by Brigham himself, roughly half of 1858 expenditures. It was redeemed later and burned in 1867, but it shows how strapped they were before the army spending kicked in. And then there's the loss of isolation and autonomy, which would never be regained. The army and the camp followers brought outsiders, vice, federal judges, and constant scrutiny. Brigham faced ongoing indictments, treason, again, later tied to other events. The theocratic kingdom was never the same. More commerce, yes, but also more interference. Johnston's army did enrich the saints materially, but it forced Brigham to trade his grand territorial political theocratic vision for survival. His lost territory, the governorship, and a year's progress and momentum were costly concessions. The saints got richer in the moment, but Brigham lost ground on the bigger dream he had been building since 1847. The saints also paid in autonomy and elbow room. The army and its followers brought outsiders, vice, federal judges, and constant scrutiny. Brigham faced ongoing indictments And the theocratic kingdom, his vast semi-autonomous Mormon empire, was never the same once the army marched through. This was the real cost when Brigham called the saints home from the colonies. What's next on Zion's fire? We'll take a look at those mysterious Masonic ties connecting President Buchanan, Brigham Young, Colonel Johnston, and Thomas L. Kane, and how that brotherhood oath may have influenced Kane's crucial negotiations. See you on the trail.